Hi there. Dice are of course very important in BattleTech. You use them to roll to hit locations, piloting skill rolls and all that stuff. But they're also very commonly used to indicate information on the battlefield for all players. And if you've been playing BattleTech for any length of time, I'm sure you'll know all about this, but I do have a couple of tips for especially the newer players who are just getting into BattleTech on how to just display more information on the battlefield for your benefit and your opponent's benefit. First off, the very basics of why we put down the dice on the battlefield. First off, number one is to indicate the movement mode for the player who's moved the mech. Commonly, white is used for walking, black is used for running, and red is used for jumping units. Secondly, the number, the pips on the die, are used to indicate the target movement modifier to the other player who wants to shoot at them. They want to be able to see the dice so they can determine what's a good target, what they want to hit, what they need to get to hit. And the third reason we use the dice is of course to show which mechs or units you've already activated. I'm not going to move the Wyvern anymore because I already have a dice behind it, right? So that's the very basics of why we actually use the dice in the first place. On to my two little tips here. My first tip is super simple, and I'm sort of embarrassed to admit that I understood this like over 2 years into the hobby of playing BattleTech, and it's where you actually place the dice. This is something I very rarely see people do, but it's so simple and we should change it right now. Let's take my Wyvern here. It's moved up to here for whatever reason, and it's got a TMM of 2. And this is where people commonly place their dice, their movement dice. I'm playing from like camera position and my opponent is on the other side, and I place my die here behind my Wyvern. Why though? Again, the information that the die is supposed to convey is first off movement mode for me. That's going to affect my attacker modifier, so I only need to see the color. But for my enemy, what's more important, actually the only thing that's interesting to them, is the amount of TMM I've gotten, the pips, and they see it from the other side, so why not put the die in front of your mech? I see the color perfectly. I can even put it behind the mech, like from my position, and I can still see the color, no problem. But now my opponent can see the pips. Let's take a look at it from a different perspective. Let's put an enemy Griffin up here. If they put their movement die and they jumped behind the mech, sure, I can see the color. But I don't want to see the color, I want to see the pips. So if my enemy put the die up here, no problem. Again, the point of the movement dice is to add as much information on the table as possible for yourself and your opponent, right? You want your opponent to be able to see your dice as clearly as possible so you can play the game more efficiently. So that's my tip number one. Now, as for my second tip here, this is sort of the default way of doing things for a lot of people I play with, but not everyone does this, and not everyone knows that you can do this. But I just think it's good practice because you're, again, putting more information on the battlefield to help both you and your opponent. And it is including the information of the hex you're standing in into the movement dice. So let's say my Wyvern here wants to walk into this hex of light woods. 1, 2, 3, 4. It is of course going to get the white die for walking and a +1 for the TMM because it moved 3 hexes. But also it is standing in a hex of light woods, so that's going to give me +1. So I'm going to put down 1 + 1, so a 2 for the Wyvern here. Or my Jenner here wants to run up into this hex of heavy woods here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. It ran 8 hexes, so it's going to get a black 3. But also it's in a hex of heavy wood, so that's going to be +2. So I'm going to put down a whole 5 for its TMM, which is very nice for the Jenner. Now I've included all of the available information for my opponent to see what sort of targets they're going to have on the battlefield. But you can also add all the other bonuses you get from just the movement itself. For example, the opponent has a griffin who wants to jump into this hex of light woods. So it's going to jump 5 hexes right here. So we got a red movement die, and for moving 5 hexes it's going to get a 2. But it jumped into a hex of light woods, so it's going to get a 3. But also it jumped, so it's going to get 1 more point for the jump itself. Now, one might be very tempted to include the information that it also has partial cover in the hex that it is in for the wyvern, right? If the wyvern wants to shoot at the griffin, it's going to get +1. So you might want to think, or you might want to include the information on the die, but you shouldn't do that because that's sort of situational. Because the Jenner, if he wants to shoot at the griffin, it's not going to get that bonus. The griffin is not going to get partial cover. So you only include the information from the hex it is standing in, not anything that's in between. For example, should our griffin want to shoot at this wyvern from this hex, there's another hex of light woods in the way, but you're not going to include it on this die because it's not information from the hex that it is currently in. It's additional information, right? Oh, as a final thing, you can buy these movement dice that are specifically made for BattleTech. You can see them on the screen right now. Now, I don't have them and I've never seen them used, and I like the idea, but I think the text looks a little bit small because on normal dice you can just see the pips very clearly if you got like good contrast on the dice. So I kind of worry that the text might be a little bit small on these, but you know, if you have them, if you like the looks of them, if you want to try them, you can always get them. You can find them on Etsy and stuff. So why not? If you like them, great. Anyway, those are a couple of ideas on how to add more information onto the battlefield in BattleTech for your benefit and your opponent's benefit. Make those games a little bit speedier, a little bit more efficient. I guess there are a couple of more things you could do. You could get like, let's say, green dice to represent like forest bonuses and stuff, like woods bonuses, or, you know, extra dice to put onto the battlefield for like woods and stuff, or partial cover that's sort of in the way or along the line of sight. You could add those, I guess, but I've never seen anyone do that. But, you know, you could. But that's pretty much the video for this time. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.